Classic Rock Beagle.
Welcome to the Annals of the Classic Rock Beagle. I'm Dobbs and this is Moser. And this is Moser. Moser. Moser? Moser! You made me use 3 punctuation marks for your name, Moser. What are you doing? Really? What's that? Okay, and how do you gather data? I've been contemplating how the speculum looks like Crow from MST3K in mid-production.
As you know, Joel, some years ago I donated my chompers to medicine. I'm always keen to help, but now I find myself addicted to this taste of snatch. Do you think I have a problem?
But at least I didn't give away the next album rank.
Led Zeppelin.
Really? What do you take me for, Moser? So. Elvin Miller was a widow in Southern California who was... but... Fine. Before we start the album rank for Led Zeppelin, let us read the mailbag. Moser. And what does it say? He asks with fear and trepidation. Fine. I'm going to change the category name just to show that this is just my opinion. So going forward, the category name will be changed from legendary to excellent.
Excellent!
I knew you were going to do that, Moser. Anyways, we're going to make yet another change to the grading system.
Ooh.
I'm adding a category to distinguish the elite from among the elite. Perfect is going to be for songs and albums that are distinguished even among the already elite songs and albums. Here's the ranking list going forward starting episode 22. So Led Zeppelin.
That guy from the James Page Skiffle Group would go on to become a top session musician in England before joining the Yardbirds in 1966. In 1968, Page found himself the last man standing in said band. He looked to reform the band around friend John Paul Jones, and later added vocalist Robert Plant and drummer John Bonham. This unit, Keith Moon said, would, quote, fall like a Led Zeppelin, end quote. Instead of falling, Led Zeppelin would inherit the mantle from the Beatles as the preeminent force in rock music by developing what Cream and Fleetwood Mac were doing at the time and taking it to the next level. Zeppelin has left an indelible mark on rock music to this very day.
And for this album rank, we won't list the producer or lineup for each album because this was the same throughout Led Zeppelin's run. Here it is. Now, without further ado, here is the album rank for Led Zeppelin starting with number 9.
Drummer John Bonham passed away due to pulmonary aspiration after a day of intense drinking in September 1980. After his passing, Led Zeppelin disbanded, with one more album due to Atlantic Records to fulfill their contractual obligation. Here is Led Zeppelin's spokesman on the motivation for Coda.
Hey, I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Guitarist Jimmy Page mixed and produced 6 unreleased studio tracks recorded between 1970 and 1978, with additional guitar overdubs as well as live covers of Benny E. King's We're Gonna Groove and Willie Dixon's I Can't Quit You Baby. Physical Graffiti also included outtakes from the earlier sessions, so that bone was pretty well picked before Coda. If they hadn't cleared out 7 songs already for PG, they could have put together a credible posthumous release here for the contractual obligation recording. Let this be a warning against unnecessarily doing double albums. The cupboard was so bare that Coda included the aforementioned I Can't Quit You Baby, which is actually a track on Zeppelin's first album, Bad Form. Anyways, Coda found its admirers, including Kurt Loder from Rolling Stone, who called Coda, quote, a resounding farewell, end quote, and Rick Albano from Classic Rock Reviews, who said, quote, a fine and entertaining album and a must-have for any serious fan of the artist, end quote. I, however, tend to agree with the detractors. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad I heard Ozone Baby and Poor Tom. But it is an uneven album at best, but the more accurate word for Coda is pedestrian.
Because it's composed almost entirely of unreleased tracks, I'm including Coda on this list. A decent album. Next.
After recording a very successful album in Physical Graffiti in 1975, singer Robert Plant was seriously injured in a car wreck that cut the tour short. In lieu of touring to support the album, Zeppelin went back to the studio for a few weeks toward the end of 1975. Presence differed from the earlier albums on several counts. First, Presence saw more of a Page-Plant songwriting duo rather than a band collaborative composition. After Plant's accident, Bonham and Jones took some time off, but Page stayed with Plant, and the album being written mostly by the time the other members joined them in the studio. The only exception, Royal Orleans, is what you're hearing now. The second difference is stylistic. Led Zeppelin can rip your face off, but also write intricate songs with great musical complexity and sonic diversity. Instead of going into divergent styles and arrangements throughout the album, Presence is a straight-ahead electric album foreshadowing the coming of punk later in the decade. On Presence, you'll find precious little acoustic guitar and no keyboards. You'll notice on the song list that one song stands head and shoulders above the others. Achilles' Last Stand is an absolute prog masterpiece. It has great energy and complexity. It goes over 10 minutes with several movements in a coherent and memorable journey. I have listed it as my second favorite Zeppelin song overall. And on the flip side, the only single was the second worst pre-Coda Zeppelin song.
Unfortunately, there's a lot more candy store rock on this album than Achilles' Last Stand, but the gem raises the album to the low good level. Next.
Led Zeppelin was formed as a hastily put-together group to complete the Yardbirds' last tour in July 1968. By the fall of 1969, they had completed 2 extremely successful albums and tours, and became the heir apparent to the Beatles' perch on top of the rock world, and completely rewrote rock history. Zeppelin went into the studio in December 1969 to record their third album, cryptically called Led Zeppelin III. Yeah, scholars are still discussing the meaning of that album title. Anyways, Plant and Page settled into a Welsh cottage during their downtime and wrote a lot of songs there. Jimmy Page explained that, quote, this wonderful countryside, panoramic views, and having guitars actually living together at Bronny Rar as opposed to occupying nearby hotel rooms. It was just an automatic thing to be playing. And we started writing. The songs took us into areas that changed the band, and it established a standard of traveling for inspiration, which is the best thing a musician can do, end quote. One result was that Page and Plant started taking a more pastoral tack on their songwriting. They didn't abandon face-peeling rockers writing the Immigrant Song there. But you'd probably have not heard songs like Tangerine, Friends, and That's the Way on Zeppelin II, although Ramble On already pointed toward that direction. In return, they would expound on this newfound direction over the next 3 albums with at times spectacular results. Like the Beatles before them, Zeppelin excelled as they expanded.
Led Zeppelin III was a warm-up for their legendary 4th album, and a good one at that. Next.
Jimmy Page and Robert Plant is one of the greatest songwriting tandems in rock history. Bonham and Jones make ample writing appearances on the Zeppelin catalog, but most of the writing credits at least include Plant and Page. While Robert and Jimmy show up in the writing credits for 5 of the 7 songs in In Through the Outdoor, the album shows a major step forward for John Paul Jones, who has 6 writing credits on the album. It's not a coincidence that keyboards make a major comeback on this, especially following the Ivoryless album Presence. Jonesy here discovered the synthesizer and was not afraid to use it. Like its predecessor, there was a significant delay in the release of Into the Outdoor, again due to Robert Plant's terrible misfortune. In 1977, his son Carrick passed away. All of My Love was a touching tribute to him. In addition, Led Zeppelin was in hot water with the HRMC at the time of the recording. It was finally released in August 1979. It was panned by critics pretty much across the board, with Charles Young of Rolling Stone writing at the time, quote, "With Page's creativity apparently failing and no one able to compensate, even Led Zeppelin is not Led Zeppelin," end quote. At the risk of banishment from the world of musical criticism, I respectfully disagree. I thought it was a good blend of different styles throughout. It's not their best work, but I enjoyed it.
It's interesting to note that all 3 songs that I categorized as great on the Into the Outdoor album are very divergent in styles. All in all, the album's in the very top edge of the good category. Next.
In 1968, guitarist Jimmy Page was fertile with musical ideas. He was eager to innovate on what Clapton, Hendrix, and Green were doing at the time, and wanted to start a new version of the Yardbirds to accomplish this. Page called upon his friend and former studio collaborator John Paul Jones to help form the band. Page's choice for singer in the new band is former Jaywalkers frontman Terry Reid, who was performing as a solo act at the time. Reid turned down Page but recommended a lesser-known singer, Robert Plant. Plant accepted the invite and suggested that he bring along drummer John Bonham. After catching their band live, Page and Jones eagerly accepted them into the new unit. Keith Moon did the band an immense favor by labeling them a Led Zeppelin, freeing the new band from the Yardbird catalog by using the new moniker. Zeppelin went into the studio in September 1968. Keep in mind that Page lived in the studio from 1963 through 1966. For their debut, he utilized the technique of playing live, using the natural ambiance of the room to add depth to their sound. The resulting album, cryptically called Led Zeppelin, Anyways, the album was enthusiastically received by critic and public alike. It has gone down as one of the most important albums in rock history. It was wildly received at the time and still to this day. Commercially, the album went 8 times platinum in the US and was immensely successful throughout the world.
As rock music was ready to come out from the shadows of psychedelia, Led Zeppelin broke open the doors to the next generation of music with their legendary debut album, welcoming it with the opening drum riff from Good Times, Bad Times. Led Zeppelin, a great album. Next.
After Led Zeppelin's incredible debut, how could they possibly follow up on that? With their second album, apparently. It was cryptically called Led Zeppelin II.
What? What?
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
So anyways.
Their second effort was recorded during breaks in the touring schedule throughout 1969. It took the blues on steroids in a big empty room approach to the first album and cranked it up another notch. The album greeted you with perhaps the prototype Zeppelin song, Whole Lotta Love. For all the success their debut had, Zepp 2 left it in the dust. It went to the top 3 albums just about everywhere in the world and sold 12 million copies in the US alone. It was not only successful commercially, but is one of the most legendary albums of all time. John Mendelsohn of Rolling Stone wrote at the time of its release, quote, "This is one fucking heavyweight of an album. Hey, you've got to admit that Zeppelin has their distinctive and enchanting formula down stone cold, man." End quote. Stephen Erlewine of AllMusic wrote, quote, "Led Zeppelin II provided the blueprint for all the heavy metal bands that followed it." End quote. Rolling Stone placed it at number 79 on the top 500 albums of all time in 2003, and it landed number 123 in 2020. In the backdrop of loud, aggressive songs like the Lemon Song, Heartbreaker, and Living Loving Maid, a song like Thank You stands out all the more. I'm almost there with this album.
Zeppelin II did improve on the debut with more sophisticated composition and more refined chemistry in the band. But it was a bit too much straight blues for my taste. The critically acclaimed Zeppelin II is a great album.
After the Houses of the Holy Tour, Led Zeppelin got together at Ronnie Lane's mobile studio to record their next record in November 1973. And by Led Zeppelin, I mean Jimmy Page and John Bonham. Vocalist Robert Plant was still recovering from the tour, and John Paul Jones told Zeppelin's manager Peter Grant that he wanted to quit. Grant told him to take the rest of the year off. This stint was cut short, as the studio had been taken over by this new supergroup called Bad Company. But it was not unproductive, as Bonham and Page wrote the skeleton for the song that would become Kashmir. The full Zeppelin fleet was ready to go into the studio in January. Over the next 2 months, Zeppelin had one of the most productive periods in their history, producing 8 tracks the Plant called, quote, the Belters. It was so productive, in fact, they couldn't fit their music onto 2 sides of vinyl. They added previously unreleased material and recorded jams to fill out a double album, Physical Graffiti. The term physical graffiti was coined by Jimmy Page to describe what he regarded as a physical writing process to the album. Physical Graffiti would become Zeppelin's most successful album commercially and critically, going platinum in the US on pre-orders alone. Here we see our first use of the shiny new, quote, perfect category for Kashmir. In the Light is an amazing prog piece with a killer ending. Trampled Underfoot rips off Long Train Running.
If you polled Zeppelin fans, Physical Graffiti would probably wind up their number 1 album. I have it at number 3, a great album. Next.
Led Zeppelin III, while beloved and successful in its own right, was a little short of the commercial and critical success of its 2 predecessors. In December 1970, Led Zeppelin went into the studio to record its cryptically
unnamed album. Yeah, check the title card. It's not called Led Zeppelin IV, it's unnamed. Can we get back to the review, please?
Released in November 1971, The untitled album, colloquially called Zeppelin IV or Zoso, became their most successful album, selling 37 million albums worldwide, and re-establishing Zeppelin as the top dog in the rock game. There were 2 guest musicians on the album. Pianist Ian Stewart, a founding member of the Rolling Stones, played on rock and roll. More significantly, Fairport Convention Sandy Denny does a brilliant duet with Robert Plant on The Battle for Evermore. It was Denny, or more correctly, the combination of Denny and Plant, that made The Battle for Evermore a great song. And of course, this album contains the defining song for Led Zeppelin and beginner guitar players everywhere. As you can see, as many times as I've heard Stairway over the decades, I'm still placing it in my my outstanding category. It is one of the few pieces of music in my lifetime that has brought tears to my eyes from the sheer beauty of the music, as opposed to this.
Oh, dear God, make it stop!
Not one song fell to the decent category, which is remarkable. Although Misty Mountain and Four Sticks came close, and rock and roll hasn't aged that well.
I try to make sure sentimental consideration does not overly factor my reviews. This is the first time the first album I owned from a band was this close to the top. It's a great album. Next.
Do you remember what I said about Rumors? I love to point out that Rumors was so good that a great song like Silver Springs was left off of it. Well, Houses of the Holy is so good that the freaking title track was left off. You'll find Houses of the Holy on the Physical Graffiti review. Anyways, Hot H was an eclectic mix of songs, partially because of the eclectic sources of material. There were songs such as No Quarter that had been aborted ideas from their 4th album. Page and Jones also brought some fully completed ideas from their home studios, such as the Rain Song and Over the Hills and Far Away by Page, and a fully developed No Quarter by Jones. Some were developed by jams in the studio, such as The Grunge and Dancing Days. House of the Holy was recorded over a period of 8 months and released in March 1973. By all accounts, it was a difficult recording to make, but it went to number 1 through most of the English-speaking world, going diamond by the standards of the RIAA. Despite its success, Houses had somewhat mixed critical reviews. On the Dobbs chart, it goes straight to the top by a significant margin over the untitled album. Like Physical Graffiti, it has 2 songs in the excellent category or above, and like Zoso, no song descends to the decent category, although Dire Maker was pretty close. What sets Houses apart is the ratio of great to good songs. Even albums I'd place higher from previous reviews overall had more than 2 good songs.
Houses of the Holy didn't miss excellent by much. It's in the very high grade category. So that was Led Zeppelin's album rank. We'll get to Mrs. Miller eventually, but I've got a doozy lined up for your next album rank. Before that, on our next episode, we'll debut a new feature to the CRB and have a special surprise lined up for you for our 1st anniversary. Now, that's not a surprise anymore, is it, Mose? No, I'm not going to do it now.
No. It's not true. That's impossible!
We'll have to come up with another surprise for that episode now. Anyways, if you like this episode, click the thumbs up below, subscribe for more content, and comment below what grade of wrong I am in this album rank. And as always, rock on.